You already felt it. The subtle shift in the room, the conversations that suddenly become careful, the strange tension people carry around you that no one can quite explain. This is not imagination. And once you understand why it happens, you will never be able to return to the comfortable version of yourself you used to believe in. Because the truth is darker than the word empath suggests. What you call empathy is not simply kindness or emotional sensitivity. It is perception. And perception destabilizes people. Without trying, you notice what others are pretending not to feel. The insecurity behind confidence, the resentment behind politeness, the quiet hunger for control hidden beneath charm. Most people spend their entire lives protecting these illusions. You expose them by simply existing. That is why the atmosphere around you slowly changes. Not openly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. People become defensive. They grow colder. They distance themselves. Not because you attacked them, because you saw them. And that is where the real problem begins. Because once a person develops this level of perception, something irreversible happens. You stop participating in the emotional theater that keeps social groups stable. You stop laughing at what feels fake. You stop trusting what feels rehearsed. You stop bonding through shared illusions. That wasn't maturity. That was separation. And the more clearly you see through people, the more uncomfortable your presence becomes to them. They may call you intense, too serious, too observant. But what they are really reacting to is something far more dangerous. You are quietly dismantling the masks they rely on to function. Carl Jung understood this dynamic long before modern psychology dared to name it. When someone becomes highly aware of emotional undercurrents, they do not simply become compassionate. They become psychologically disruptive. Because every group depends on unspoken agreements about what must remain unseen. And you keep noticing it. Which means something else begins to happen. People start resenting you, even when you have done nothing wrong. Not openly, secretly, silently. And if you have already felt that shift, if you have noticed how your awareness creates distance you never intended, then you are already standing at the edge of something most people never confront. Because what happens next is the stage where many empaths break. And the reason they break is rarely what they think. You did not become this way by accident. It usually began early, in environments where emotional signals mattered more than words. Unstable homes, unpredictable authority figures, sudden shifts in tone that meant danger long before anyone said it out loud. Your mind adapted. You learned to read micro-expressions, subtle pauses, suppressed anger, forced smiles, not as a talent, but as survival. Over time, that survival mechanism sharpened into something far more precise. You started seeing what others missed. The insecurity behind confidence. The manipulation hidden inside kindness. The quiet hierarchy operating beneath every conversation. And at first, people admired this about you. They called you understanding, insightful, easy to talk to. But admiration has an expiration date. Because perception eventually crosses a threshold where it stops comforting people and starts exposing them. That is when the friction begins. You stop reacting the way others expect. You don't laugh at performative jokes. You notice the power dynamics behind friendships. You see when someone is performing virtue rather than feeling it. And the moment people sense that you can see through them, something ancient activates in the human psyche. Defensiveness. Not logical defensiveness. Instinctive defensiveness. Because what you are triggering is what Carl Jung called shadow exposure. Every person carries a shadow. The parts of themselves they suppress to remain socially acceptable. Jealousy, insecurity, cruel impulses, hidden resentment. Most people survive socially by keeping this shadow concealed, even from themselves. But your presence quietly threatens that concealment. Not because you confront them, but because you notice. And noticing is enough. Suddenly, people begin adjusting their behavior around you. They become slightly guarded, slightly cautious. sometimes strangely irritated without understanding why. You didn't accuse them of anything. You didn't challenge them. But something about you makes them feel seen. And when the shadow feels seen, it does not respond with gratitude. It responds with hostility, quiet hostility. This is where the isolation begins. At first, it is subtle. Conversations feel different. Certain people avoid deeper interaction with you. Group dynamics shift in ways you cannot logically explain. You start sensing distance where connection once existed. And here is the cold truth most empaths eventually discover. People do not resent empathy. They resent being psychologically visible, because visibility threatens identity. Every person carries a carefully constructed image of themselves, the version they present to the world. Your awareness destabilizes that image. Without speaking, without confronting, without trying, which means your very presence creates pressure, and humans instinctively move away from pressure. This is the moment when many empaths start asking the wrong question. They assume they did something wrong. They believe they became too distant, too quiet, too analytical. But the real shift happened somewhere deeper. You stopped participating in the shared illusion that keeps most social environments comfortable. And once that illusion breaks for you, it cannot be repaired. This is the point where the empath's life quietly changes direction. Because from here, two things begin happening at the same time. Your perception continues sharpening, and your belonging continues shrinking. Most people cannot tolerate that combination. This is where most people break. But what happens in the next stage is far more dangerous. Because eventually, people don't just distance themselves from the empath. They start pushing them out. At first, the distance is passive. People become quieter around you, more guarded, more careful with their words. But eventually, something more aggressive begins to surface. Because human groups operate on an invisible contract, everyone agrees not to see too much. You broke that contract, not intentionally. But once people sense that your perception moves beneath the surface level of interaction, they stop seeing you as emotionally intelligent. They start seeing you as dangerous. Not physically dangerous, psychologically dangerous. Because groups maintain stability through shared illusions, politeness that hides resentment, friendships built on convenience, respect given to authority figures who quietly abuse power. These structures survive only if no one looks too closely. You do. And the moment someone senses that you see the hidden layer of a social structure, something subtle happens. You become friction. Your silence becomes uncomfortable. Your observations feel like accusations, even when you say nothing. People begin explaining themselves to you, even when you never asked. That wasn't communication. That was defense. Carl Jung described this as shadow projection. When people feel their hidden impulses being exposed, they rarely confront the truth directly. They project hostility onto the person who triggered the exposure, which means the empath slowly becomes the problem in the story. You are called intense, too serious, too observant, too emotionally complicated. But these labels are not descriptions. They are psychological defense mechanisms, because admitting the real reason would require confronting something most people spend their lives avoiding: their own shadow. So instead, the group quietly adjusts. You are invited less, trusted less, included less, not through confrontation, through subtle exclusion. The human psyche prefers exile over exposure, and eventually you start noticing something even colder. People feel more comfortable around those who are less perceptive, around people who laugh easily, agree easily, ignore contradictions. Those people maintain social harmony. You destabilize it. Which leads to the realization that breaks many empaths psychologically. Empathy does not guarantee connection. Often it guarantees the opposite. Because the more accurately you perceive people, the harder it becomes to participate in the illusions that bond them together. And without those illusions, social belonging begins to collapse. This is where many empaths attempt the same survival strategy. They start shrinking themselves. They soften their observations. They pretend not to notice what they clearly see. They try to become easier to tolerate, but something inside them resists. Because once perception reaches a certain depth, pretending blindness becomes exhausting and eventually impossible. This is the stage where the empath faces the first irreversible choice: continue seeing or return to comfortable ignorance. Most people choose ignorance, not because they are weak, because belonging is one of the strongest psychological forces in human life. But if you are still here, still watching, still recognizing these patterns, you probably didn't choose ignorance. Which means you are approaching the stage where empathy stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like exile. And this next stage is where the real cost begins. By this stage, the pattern is no longer subtle. You begin noticing a repeating cycle in almost every social environment you enter. At first, people are drawn to you. They feel understood, seen, safe enough to reveal things they rarely show others. Your attention lowers their defenses. For a while, this creates closeness. But closeness built on emotional exposure contains a hidden tension. Because the deeper people reveal themselves, the more they realize how much you actually see. And eventually that realization becomes uncomfortable. Not immediately, gradually. They begin remembering the things they told you during moments of honesty, the insecurity they admitted, the jealousy they confessed, the resentment they tried to justify. Suddenly your presence carries memory. You become a living reminder of the parts of themselves they prefer to forget. And the human mind has a simple strategy for handling that discomfort. Distance the witness. That witness becomes you. The same empathy that once created connection now creates pressure. People feel psychologically naked around you. They cannot fully relax. They cannot fully perform, because somewhere in the back of their mind, they suspect you can see the difference between who they are and who they pretend to be. That suspicion is enough. You stop being the safe listener. You become the silent mirror. And mirrors are rarely loved for long. This is when the social reaction changes again. Not just distance, narratives. Subtle stories begin forming about you. You're hard to read. Too analytical, emotionally distant, sometimes even arrogant. Notice the inversion. The person who spent years understanding others is now described as lacking warmth. But this distortion serves a psychological purpose. If people frame you as cold or detached, they no longer have to confront the discomfort your perception creates. The story protects them and isolates you. This is identity exile. Not because you betrayed anyone, because you stopped participating in the emotional illusions that once bonded you to the group. That realization hits slowly. You notice conversations becoming repetitive, surface level, predictable. You begin hearing the same social performances repeated in different voices, and something inside you changes. Not bitterness, withdrawal. Your tolerance for shallow interaction begins to collapse. You speak less, observe more. Sometimes you leave environments entirely without explaining why. People call this detachment. But what actually happened was erosion. Your perception kept expanding. Your patience for illusion kept shrinking. And the distance between those two forces becomes a psychological fault line. Many empaths reach this stage and start questioning themselves. They wonder if something inside them broke. If they became too guarded, too distant, too disconnected. But the colder truth is simpler. Your awareness outgrew the environments you once belonged to. And when awareness expands faster than social compatibility, exile becomes inevitable. Not dramatic exile, quiet exile, fewer invitations, fewer conversations that feel real, more time spent alone with thoughts that most people never allow themselves to think. This is where the empath begins to understand the real cost of perception. Because the deeper you see into people, the harder it becomes to stay among them. And this is the stage where the most dangerous shift begins. Not in others, inside you. Because prolonged psychological isolation does something very few people talk about. It starts transforming empathy itself. And this is the point where even empaths become strangers to themselves. At this stage, something changes inside you. Not dramatically, quietly. The empathy that once felt like connection begins to feel analytical. You still understand people, in fact, more clearly than ever. You can predict their reactions, their motives, their defenses before they even realize what they are doing. But the emotional warmth that once accompanied that understanding begins to thin out. Because repeated exposure to human contradiction does something subtle to the mind. It removes illusion faster than the heart can adapt. You begin recognizing patterns everywhere. The friend who praises loyalty but abandons people when status changes. The person who talks about honesty but constantly manipulates perception. The leader who speaks about unity while quietly dividing people behind the scenes. At first, empathy allowed you to understand these contradictions. Now, you simply expect them. And expectation slowly replaces emotional investment. You still read people, but you stop believing them. You still listen, but you stop attaching meaning to their words. This is the stage where empathy begins transforming into something colder. Psychological clarity. You see through motives before they fully form. You sense manipulation before it becomes visible. You understand insecurity before it reveals itself. And this level of perception creates an uncomfortable paradox. You understand people deeply, but you feel increasingly distant from them. Not because you stopped caring, because caring becomes harder when patterns repeat endlessly. The mind begins conserving energy. It stops reacting emotionally to dynamics it has already mapped. What once felt like compassion begins to feel like observation. This is where many empaths quietly change. They become quieter, more selective, more detached from emotional drama that once consumed their attention. Others interpret this as arrogance, coldness, even indifference. But the internal reality is different. Your nervous system adapted. Constant emotional exposure without genuine connection forces the psyche to harden, not into cruelty, into distance. And that distance creates one final realization that most empaths struggle to accept. People were never reacting to your empathy. They were reacting to your perception. Empathy allowed you to understand them. Perception allowed you to see through them. And those two forces together create a psychological presence that most people instinctively resist. Not because they hate you, because you interrupt the illusion that keeps their identity intact. Which brings you to the quiet conclusion most people never articulate out loud. The empath is not rejected because they lack emotional intelligence. They are rejected because their awareness destabilizes social comfort. And comfort is the currency most people value above truth. That is why the distance keeps growing. Not because you failed socially, because you stopped participating in the emotional agreements that make social belonging possible. Most people never reach this realization. They stay inside the system of illusions that keeps relationships stable. But if you are still watching this, still recognizing these patterns, then you already crossed the psychological line that separates observers from participants. And once someone crosses that line, they rarely go back. Not because they cannot, because they no longer believe in the world they would have to return to. Most people will stop thinking about this here, because continuing further means confronting what awareness actually demands, and awareness by itself changes nothing. It only removes excuses. What you do with that clarity is the part most people never face. By the time someone reaches this level of awareness, the damage has already begun. Not dramatic damage, structural damage. The social instincts that once guided your interactions no longer function the same way. You notice too much. You anticipate reactions before they happen. Conversations start to feel rehearsed before they even unfold. That wasn't wisdom. That was separation. Most people will stop engaging with this idea right here, not because it's wrong, because following it further begins dismantling the last comfortable story people tell themselves. That deep understanding will eventually lead to deeper belonging. It doesn't. In many cases, it produces the opposite. Awareness strips away the invisible agreements that make social life smooth. You stop pretending not to see manipulation. You stop rewarding performative emotions. You stop investing energy into dynamics built on denial. And every time you refuse those small illusions, the distance grows a little wider. Not loudly, quietly. This is why many people who develop strong psychological perception eventually face the same decision point. They can blunt their awareness and return to the system. Or they can continue seeing clearly and accept the cost that comes with it. Most people choose comfort. A few continue. If you followed this far, you already know which direction you've been moving. But awareness alone doesn't resolve anything. It only removes the mask from the environment you're standing in. And once the mask is gone, the next step is not automatic. It's a decision most people delay for the rest of their lives. Most viewers will leave the video here and go back to familiar noise. That's normal. But if you're still here, then you've already crossed the part most people never admit to themselves. You're not struggling to understand people anymore. You're deciding how much of their world you're willing to remain inside. By now, the pattern should be clear. Empathy did not make people reject you. Awareness did. The moment your perception crossed a certain threshold, something irreversible happened inside your psychology. You stopped reacting to people. You started reading them. Their words became signals. Their emotions became patterns. Their reactions became predictions. That shift seems small. It isn't. Because social life depends on something fragile. Mutual illusion. People unconsciously agree to ignore certain truths about each other so relationships remain stable. You stopped ignoring them. You began noticing the insecurity behind authority, the competition hidden inside friendships, the quiet manipulations people use to maintain control over how they are perceived. And once you see those dynamics clearly, your behavior changes whether you intend it or not. You hesitate before trusting. You observe before speaking. You disengage from emotional performances that once felt normal. To others, this creates a strange discomfort. They sense that you are not participating the same way anymore. They cannot fully relax around someone who sees too much, so they label you cold, intense, detached. But these labels are not accurate. They are protective, because admitting the real reason would mean acknowledging something people work very hard to avoid, that their identity depends on things remaining unseen. You interfere with that. Not intentionally, but consistently. That is why the empath eventually becomes the person standing slightly outside the group, listening, watching, understanding more than they wish they did. And the longer this continues, the more another quiet realization forms. You were never meant to remain where you started. Your perception changed the environment. Or more precisely, it revealed the environment that was already there. Most people will never look at it this way. They will continue moving through the same emotional patterns, the same social performances, the same carefully maintained identities, and the system will continue functioning. But if you have followed this entire descent, then something is already different. You see the mechanisms now, which means one final illusion disappears. Understanding people does not automatically reconnect you to them. Sometimes it simply shows you the structure you've been standing inside your entire life. And once you see that structure clearly, participating in it becomes a conscious act, not an unconscious one.